There's no sound on your end, Ron.
Yeah, I just realized that. So, welcome everybody. Had to guess unmute my mic. Thank you for joining us again. This is Ron and
Hey,
Ben, welcoming you to another exciting, technical, glitch-free episode of Roundtable with Ron and Ben. I am Ron, and Ben is over to my, I guess, what is it? Left, right? I don't know. He's to my left. Good morning, Ben. How are you? Can you hear me? Nope. No sound? Nothing? Ben can't hear me.
so Ron, I'm having audio problems.
Uh-oh.
I cannot hear you in our. I can hear you on the stream on YouTube, but I can't hear you where we're broadcasting from.
That's interesting. Um, okay, let's see. Because I can hear you, and how about now?
Okay, now I can hear you.
Can
I'm
everybody
kidding.
else hear me? Donley was saying no sound. Now he's saying he can hear sound.
Okay, yeah, we're good.
We're good? All right.
Yep.
Okay, so should we try this again? No, I
Yeah,
think that.
redo.
I think they should we do a redo? You want to do a redo? All right, let's do a redo. Let's do a redo. Why not? Okay, here we go. Hello, welcome back. And this is Ron, and I'm joined with Ben. And thank you for joining us to another episode of Roundtable with Ron and Ben. I'm Ron, and Ben, how are you?
Doing great.
Oh, fantastic. Now I can actually hear you. Um, a little bit, actually. I need to turn you up a little bit. Let's see. I'm not really quite sure where you're at. You're probably here. Let's try that. Okay, so the topic for today is going to be the Lorex and why we trade it.
Yeah, it's gonna be a good information, hopefully. How many how many of you have been with Apex like prior to the Lorex? Because I've been with Apex, I don't know, three years now. Like right when they launched the sniper system, way before the way before the Lorex. And so when you go through boot camp, there's a lot of different setups, right? And when I first started in sniper, I think I've talked about this in other streams. Like I went like 21 day or 20 days straight without losing a trade, and just taking all kind of setups, and just taking all sniper setups. And then I got confident and started breaking rules, but that's another story. But as I got back to following the rules and continue to trade sniper, like the market conditions change, right? And so then we started adding filter. There was always filters, but adding more filters like onto the setups, and then each of the setups had its own rules. They had rules before, but we started, as traders, we started looking at ways to get higher quality setups. And Lori has always been trading like lane threes and fours, almost fours all the time. And so she had been trading the Lorex for a long time, and she was uh, finally got Greg, the programmer, to to put it all together. And so with the Lorex, it combines a lot of elements to make it a better trade. And we're gonna talk about that today. But one of the awesome things about the Lorex, and one thing I was doing before the Lorex is, everyone looks at like higher time frame charts, right? Like we look at the 30 tick, and then some people, not us, but a lot of people, they'll look at a lower time frame chart and then a higher time frame chart. The 10 tick, that's 10 ticks of movement, right? And we're getting a new bar, and then we're looking at bigger movements and bigger levels on the 30 tick. And the Lorex is able to combine information drawing from the 30 tick and incorporate it into the 10 tick, which had never been done before. And that's what, like, the Lorex. I went to the live event, and I was talking with Greg, who programmed it. And I was like, well, how did you do this? And how did you do this? How are you pulling information from the 30 and get it over here? And he was like, it's really complicated. And I was like, well, I won't understand it anyway, but it's awesome. It's awesome that you did it. And I know that Ron, when he started, was the Lorex, when you started, was the Lorex already?
When I started, the Lorex was being described as a bonus trade um, that Lori was calling out in the room. So I actually started in mid-January of last year, and those calls were just starting, I believe, to be made as like bonus trades. And Craig at the time was, in the elite room before he passed away, and he was calling different things that he was saying, and they were trying to, combine the rules that would, later on make the Lorex. But no, the Lorex was not what it is today when I started. I had just started focusing on lane 4 trades in, I would say, the middle of March to April of last year. And that was on sniper trades. And started to pick up on what Lori was talking about, what would ultimately end up being the Lorex, which would be extremely highly filtered sniper trades, basically. So that's kind of how I started, and I was in a transition where, just like a lot of new people, where basically a bunch of stuff is just being thrown at you a million miles an hour. And to add the Lorex definition or what have you, it didn't make things any easier. So, and then the Wealth Summit came, which was a couple months later. I think it was in June of last year. And once the Lorex was finally introduced, then I dropped all sniper trades altogether and just focused on the Lorex.
Oh, that's what I did too.
Oh, sorry. Did I just kind of? Oops! Spoiler alert. Okay, so here I'm gonna let.
No, it's just funny. It's funny that the Lorex comes out, and then Ron kind of transitions to the Lorex, taking the Lorex, and that's like exactly what I did. Like, once I saw it and it was laid out, and I saw the components that go into it, I mean, abandon is not the right word, but I switched exclusively to Lorex. Now, if I see other trades that combine with a Lorex, and that's like even better, like an SLZ and a Lorex, I really like those trades. So when you combine them, they can be really good, and even a higher probability than just like a Lorex alone. It's instead of having 3, 4, 5 confirmations, you can have 6 or 7 on a Lorex, which can be pretty incredible. So yeah, when the Lorex came out, kind of transitioned my whole strategy to uh, Lorex, LREs, and simplicity. So those are the only three. Those are the only three setups that I will take during a trading session. And then when Ron and I started talking, which is totally happen chance on how we started talking, and we talk about it every once in a while. We're like, how did we hook up and start talking? It's a funny story. But so,
Do tell, Ben. Do tell.
oh, you want the story?
Oh, you can. I mean, I'm sure people want to know, right? Or maybe not. I don't know.
I'll tell it. So, um, so my dad has well, he's had leukemia. Like 7 years ago, he got leukemia, and he went into remission. He was in remission for like 5.5 years, and then it came back, and the doctors were like, "Well, it's not good." And so I was a wreck, right? Because my dad's my best friend, and I was just, not doing well, and I just really stopped, just kind of pulled back from everyone, just kind of like how people do when they're just want to be left alone or whatever. So I was really quiet in the mentor group and didn't really say anything. And Ron like randomly just messaged me. I think he asked me how I was doing or something like that. And we'd never talked before. And typically, I'm the type of person who would just ignore it and just be like, I'm not gonna respond. But I started responding, and then shortly after we started talking on the phone, and then of course we start talking trading, and Ron's like, "This is what I'm working on," and I'm like, "Oh, that's what I'm working on too. Oh my gosh, okay." And then it just like blossomed from there, where we started working together, and Ron has amazing insights, and every once in a while I have a good insight, and so we've really combined those things, and kind of he had rules, I had rules, and they were very much, in line, and I altered a little thing I was doing, he altered little things, and so we formulated something that's been working working really well for us, and it's all been focused uh, around the Lorex, right? And so we're like, yeah, I'm trading the Lorex. You're trading the Lorex. What are you looking for in the Lorex? Well, this is what I'm looking for. And they were very, very close in line. And then LREs and simplicity. And then, we had the simplicity video. And if you haven't watched that, we talk about how to filter simplicities and not just take every simplicity and what we're looking for in the simplicities. But so that's kind of the story how Ron and I met, and that was several months ago. And then we talked about, hey, maybe we should do a podcast. Sometimes we're pretty funny when we talk to each other, and so we're like, okay, let's try and do a podcast. And then we had planned that like in August, September, I think I mean, we had a plan a while ago, but it just took us a long time to actually do it.
Yeah, we're kind of slow that way, right? Think
Yeah.
of something
Well,
and then it takes a
I
while
had
to.
to I had to get the okay to buy a webcam from my wife, and there's a lot of paperwork, and it is a long time to get that approved, but I got it approved. So okay, anyway, so that's kind of the backstory on Ron and I. So when the Lorex came out, like I said, transitioned whole strategy, everything to the Lorex. And so what is the Lorex, right? If we were going to talk about what the Lorex is. So Lori always talks about, and ever since I've known her, been in the ER, she always talks about these no-brainers. And they're Lori's trades that she's been trading forever, but now we finally have a name for them on what her no-brainer, uh, what she's looking at. So the Lorex is a trade. It's a reversal trade with a lot of confirmations, and they validate the direction of our trade. And they're even better when you're taking them off. Well, we can talk about that in a minute. But so they have so one of the things about the Lorex, it has, like, one of the characteristics about it, it has a very high probability of retracing. But so when you get in a trade, right, and especially if you got a cluster on the wick, right, which we really like, the higher up the cluster or the lower the cluster, depending on if you're going long or short. If we got a cluster on the wick, that's what we really like. Now, one of the things with the Lorex is they can they have a tendency to retrace because you have a stack of orders on that cluster. So some of them can give you heart attacks, but they have a really high probability of winning. And I've back tested the Lorex, like manually went back and logged. I probably logged like 1,000 Lorexes, like manually. That takes a long time.
Hey Ben, just
Yeah.
while we're there, can you see what I'm highlighting?
Yeah. There's one that's live, right?
That's almost live. That's maybe a
Well,
couple hours ago. I'm leaving it here for a reason, so that we can bar by bar it later.
Gotcha.
As
okay.
you described. So I'm going to leave this here, but we're going through the setup. So, and look at the components on this guy.
Yeah, so on that one, it's got the cluster, trapped order, exhaustion X, and a trapped box.
Right, and OPR.
So we got. Yeah.
Let me get to. I'll even get to the OP bar on it. So hold on a second. Where's the OP bar? And then if you look at the vertical line on the right, you'll see where it is on the 30.
Oh, it does have OPR. Gotcha. So yeah, so that has 5 confirmations that we look for in a reversal bar. And to answer your question, Rad, yes, I've tested. You're talking about RTY and YM. So I've tested it on NQ, RTY, YM, and CL. I kind of have back tested a little bit on ES, but I don't really trade ES, so I scrapped all that effort because my time is better focused on markets that I'm actually going to trade.
And G Shields, you're right, that does not have a mini magnet or a paw, but it does have OPR and exhaustion X. Has them both. So we can talk about that. We'll continue later as we talk about the requirements.
So Metatron asks what were my results on back testing. I've talked about this in other videos briefly. Back testing is kind of a really deep rabbit hole you can get lost in, right? Because I could look at something and back test it and just, fudge the number, not really fudge the numbers, but look at stuff a little bit different. Like, well, this trade has a 90% win rate, and this trade only has a 60% win rate. So when I go back, it's just straight, it's in session back testing, right? I'm only looking at trades from open, right, or from 9:35 Eastern to noon. So I take that segment of time because each time that the market runs, like 2 o'clock at night versus open is a totally different animal. And so all my data is based off session I'm going to trade because it's the most relevant. If I take a different time during the day, then all that data is just completely, it's garbage. And so in my back test, and depending on the market, and they're usually within like 5 to 7% difference in win rate. They're between 70 and 75% win rate. Now, if you like with the Lorex, there's different components, and so if you break down this, just the base Lorex, that's the 70-75% win rate. Now, if you add on additional confirmations like Ron has, and where he is requiring a few more things than just a base Lorex. So he's filtered, so he's taken the Lorex and all the rules for the Lorex, hasn't modified any of the rules, but is just looking for a few additional confirmations, and that win rate is a little higher. Now, you can look at it from month to month. Sometimes YM performs better. Sometimes RTY performs better. And sometimes NQ on the 10 tick is kind of the worst performer out of all of them on those three markets, but it still has about a 65% win rate. But with NQ, you really have to filter the Lorex down. Like my son, he trades the NQ Lorex on the 10, and he looks for levels and I zones to trade off of, and that helps bump excuse me, that helps bump the win percentage. But YM and RTY are really good for the Lorex, and CL can also be good on the Lorex. But I stick to YM and RTY mainly for the Lorex.
Real quick, Grant, I don't understand your question. What do you mean, is the OPR the 2 and 0? I thought we wanted that in double digits. I don't understand what that means. Do you know what that means?
I'm not sure what that means. But
right above the
TX.
TX. Oh, you mean the numbers in the two? That has no relevance at all to the OPR. That's just the diamond symbol up at the top that gives you the OPR symbol right next to the absorption X, above it to the left. The numbers in the Xbox don't make a difference at all to that.
Okay, so one of the characteristics that I really like about the Lorex, Ron, have you ever taken a Lorex where it's a one and done?
You mean like when it runs and I hit my target and the trailer hits the target?
Yeah, that's super awesome.
I've taken a couple of those. Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the things about the Lorex is they have, because they are quote unquote no-brainers and they're high probability trades with confirmations built in there, when those are all factored together, they have a high chance to run, right? And they have an even higher chance to get your scalp. So that's one of the things I really liked about the Lorex is its percentage chance to run. Because if I'm going to take, let's say I average 4 trades. Let's say I average 4 trades a day. And I go over a month. How many trades is that? Now, out of those total number of trades, what percentage can I expect that are going to run? Now, not everyone is going to run. Not everyone is going to win, and not everyone is going to lose. But it's all about probabilities for me. And I think that's one of the things that I brought to the table with Ron and I is I'm kind of the numbers guy, and then Ron has all the other skills and talents. But I bring the numbers.
I have no skills and no talents.
Oh, you have tons of. Just got to compliment Ron. He loves compliments.
Yeah, whatever.
So yes, so I'm the numbers guys, right? So if I look at, So if I look at a month, right, and I'm going to take 4 trades a day times how many trading days, how many trades can I expect to run, right? And I can go back and look. I can look at my back testing and say, well, if I started here and if I took 4 trades, I can expect, say, in a given month, 30%. Or if I'm, on a good month, like 50% of the trades that I'm taking will run. So that's a really high probability that not only are they going to win, not only are they going to be winners, that they will also run and have a chance to get my one and done. Because there's no greater feeling than taking a valid setup that meets all your conditions and it's a one and done. It's like, oh man, that's amazing. That's the best trade ever, right? Like that should be the goal, is to take these high confirmation trades with a higher probability to trail and to get your one and done. And maybe they don't get your one and done, right? Maybe they trail a little bit. I know, like it trails, and it say like my profit goal on like a 50K is $300 a day, right? So maybe it trails and I get to like 270. I didn't get to 300, but I'm at 270. So at that point, am I going to take another trade when I'm like $30 from my profit goal? Am I going to risk, a 2 contract loss? No, I'm not going to risk taking a loss when I'm really close to my profit goal. So maybe it doesn't trail. Maybe I don't hit my profit goal, but I have a chance of getting really close or exceeding it. There's also been days where that 300 profit goal turns into like a $500 or $600 day. I mean, I've seen, I've had days like that, and Ron has had days like that too, where it just keeps going. And so that's one of the reasons that I really like the Lorex.
Can we stay on before we kind of go on, can we just stay on this for just a second on the runner part of it?
Gotcha.
Because I want people to understand that it's happens more than you think. And one of the things that I'd like to point out is that if we look at all the Lorexes as a whole, and we'll just call that, we'll put that on a canvas. Now, what I like to do is I focus on a very, very specific setup. And that's the only thing that I want popping at me. And that's the only one that I'm going to take. So there's 2 examples I want to show, and they all happened within very recent time. One was today, and the other one was yesterday. The one today is the one that RTY that I was pointing on the screen right now, and if we can just kind of go through it bar by bar, it didn't run to a great extent, but it easily got way more than just the target. So here's our setup bar. Okay, now this would not be something that I would probably take, but Lori would call this thing in the room and would be very, very happy to take this trade, because the next bar gets us in. This would be our entry right here at 1936.5. It almost hits our target at 37.4. We needed to go to 37.5, but we didn't get there. One tick away. And it retraced back a little bit. The next bar basically takes us back up again. Still, we haven't stopped out. Our stop is here. Right? Our stop is 21 ticks behind the entry, or actually right behind at the close of this bar, where it would close down. Next bar gets up, 37.5. There's basically our scalp just came off, hit target 1. If we're trading 2 contracts like Ben and I are on a 50K. Once this happens, our trailer moves up here to our break even plus 2 ticks, which would be at, what is it? If our entry is 5, so it would be 7. Next bar goes up, we're at 38. Next bar above that goes to 18.5. At this point, when this thing closes, our trailer would take us back up to plus basically 5 or maybe even 10, and it keeps going, and at this bar it stopped us out. We probably would have got stopped at 81, at 8.1. So from an entry of 13.6 to, let's say, 38.5 at the worst case scenario, it's another 9 ticks. So we got 19 on the runner and 10 on the scalp. Is 29 ticks on one trade. Okay.
So I know Donley, he just asked, when they run, is your target then 30 ticks? So we discussed this in our ATM video, right, where the runner is set at, what is it, 50 or 60? Yeah, 50 ticks. So, but like on a trade like this, and we kind of look at it like, because that 50 ticks, it's not, most of the time it stays there, but like on a trade like this, we're going like, what's above it? Like, where did that bar reverse at?
Yeah, because I didn't continue to say that we've got settlement that we're going into. So, and I know that you're going to talk about this, Ben, so I just wanted to throw that out there and go ahead and continue with your thought. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, not interrupting at all. So yeah, so we got settlement right above it. So on a trade like this, if we're in it, there is a high probability that it will go to settlement and turn around. Now, could it just completely blow through settlement and keep going? Yeah, that's always a possibility. But if you're managing this trade and trying to maximize the ticks, and not only at settlement, there's also blue ice and there's also 2 mini magnets. So you have 4 OP levels sitting at that bar. Well, 3. I don't know if we count settlement as an OP level, but it's settlement, 2 mini magnets, right? And then a wall, and then ice, right? So you have 3 OP levels plus settlement. Chances are it's going to turn around. So if you were to take this trade, you get your scalp, you take your 10 ticks, right? And then you're looking at it, it's like, where's a good place for my second target? Where should I aim for? And what I always do is like, so say I see an OP stack, right? I always go just a few ticks just below it, just in case it doesn't reach it. So if, like for this example, I would be right below that mini magnet that's below settlement. And that's where my runner target would be, because it's a pretty strong level, pretty good chance that it's going to turn around. So the target would be there, and it would have hit max ticks, and it would have been a great trade. So yeah, it's kind of like how we do it in simplicity, right? Before we get into simplicity trade, Ron and I basically know our entries, because we're looking for it to break us. You know, we're looking for that tight consolidation. We're looking for it to break with a confirmed simplicity, and then before we enter the trade, we already know where we're targeting. So we're targeting, you know, the 0.5 or this stack or that stack, but the targets have already been identified. So that's what I would do when you're trading Lorex. You know, go for the scalps, and if you're going to do a runner, always be looking on where, if you got, like, if you're just going through a mini magnet or something, you know, maybe let it run. But if you got like a big OP stack or you got settlement, then just do the right thing. It's so easy to say that. It's hard to do it in practice, but when you see a stack or a level that if you have one thought of hesitation about, is it going to break it, just move that trailer just right below where you think it's going to turn around, take it, mark it in your chart as a win, and then go to the next trade.
So before I go on to the next example, there was a question about what this little line right here is next to our Lorex setup. So this is a partial Lorex setup that's set up in the middle of our trade. Now, I'm always going to ignore this until my trade finishes. especially when I was already at 9 ticks close to profit. Chris, does that answer your question? Or Rad?
What did he ask? I'm sorry.
He asked what the yellow bar line was next to the Lorex setup.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, that's no, it's not. Because I mean, it happens, but it's very rare that it happens on a setup that I take, and this is not a setup that I would take. In relation to, it kind of leads into my my next example on YM right here. This is one that I would take. Okay? Lori would be very hesitant to take this, but at the same time, she would have every reason to take this, and I'll kind of go over why. So here's our setup bar. Let's look at a couple things. One, we have everything that I'm looking for, which is the TX, the trapped orders, so it's basically the Xbox and the trapped orders, a mini magnet or a paw, TX on the 30. By the way, notice that it did stay blue, which means that the TX on the 30 stayed. Exhaustion X, and OPR. So the only thing that this is missing that would have made this thing just like a complete bulletproof trade would be a mini magnet, which is not required because that requirement was met by the paw that was laid. Okay, that's the only component that's literally missing. It had everything else. Now let's talk about what else this thing had. Had a cluster next to another cluster on the previous bar, which is right here. And both of these guys are on a ZOI. Notice the timestamp, 10:28. This is during a trading session. So the question for you guys is, would I take this trade, yes or no?
I already know the answer, but
I know you know the answer, Ben.
He sends me all the questions in advance.
Yeah,
That's how I know the answer.
Exactly. It's all pre-fed. Yeah. So not only would I take this trade, but I would take this trade every day, all day, and I would want these things to keep coming at me a million miles an hour. And here is the reason why. Okay? Ready for this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We just hit our target on the runner. And again, look what happened. It stopped us out. Right before, or not before, our runner hit our take profit. Now, I usually don't get emotional about stuff, but I was super pissed because I missed this trade. Because I was trying to explain something in the elite room, and I completely missed it.
It makes you feel better, Ron. I missed that trade too.
Yeah, I know, because we talked about it.
I
And
was
think
looking at
there was a couple of few choice words that were going back and forth, and thank goodness that it was muted yesterday. But anyway, so Rad, Chris, you had asked before, does it ever run on RTY or YM? No, Grant, it was not your fault. The answer to that is yes. And with a setup like this, it will almost always run.
Yeah, it has a very, very high probability of running. So then Bruce has said, why wouldn't your trailing stop be taken out on bar 4 of the trade? 2, 3.
Because I actually watched this trade after the entry. This thing actually retraced before it went up, so it didn't move the stop yet. The stop didn't move until actually this bar closed.
Yeah, so if the bar if the bar closes on the third bar and then it retraces on that fourth bar and then goes up, the ATM won't kick in until it hits that the amount of ticks required to move the stop. So now if it went all the way up and didn't close like one tick before the close
And then it
and
would
then
retrace and it
retraced
would get
off,
taken out.
then you would get taken out. But on that trade, the bar closed, it retraced, and so the the stop hadn't moved to what would be the second phase because it hit 10, right? So it'd be moved to break even, and then it kept going.
So it would have gotten close to taking out a break even, but it didn't.
Yeah.
Just the way that this happened, because I actually watched this thing.
And sometimes and sometimes you can get taken out just by like one tick because it all depends on your entry. Like, sometimes you can get put in like 2, 3 ticks above that setup bar, or I've had it where you get in 2, 3 ticks, below the setup bar. So it's
A lot
I
of
mean,
it tells also where you get filled too.
right when you get filled. So there's a lot of variables involved in that. But looking at that trade, it wouldn't get stopped out. Now, if 50 people would have taken it, is there a possibility that some of those people might have got taken out? I mean, yeah. But a lot of the times we see, well, not a lot of times, but there is more often than not times where we see a trade just like this and there ain't no wicks. And if there is a wick, it's just a tiny one, and it will go for the full run or to a good target.
I'm trying to read some of the questions here. Jeff is asking, do I ever take them if they just have the yellow bar, which has the TX on the 30, and all the additional parts for your ideal setup? So if it has the TX on the 30 and all the parts that I'm looking for, it would never just be a yellow bar. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, all the way he has it filtered, they're all full Lorexes. So yeah, so that example right there, we see that quite, more often than not is we see the runner, and that's a perfect example of a running Lorex that has all the components, especially what Ron is looking for. It's got all his components, and he's going to take that trade every time. Is it going to win every time? No. I mean, both Ron and I have taken trades that on paper look perfect. Just everything about them is perfect, and they still lose. But when the next trade comes up that it's exactly like that, am I going to take that trade? Yeah, because I know probability says that I have a good chance of it being a winning trade. So if it meets all the conditions, and the conditions were formulated based on Lori creating the setup, and then Ron and I confirmed all the statistics with back testing, and so we know that our conditions and our setups have a high probability, and not only a high probability of winning, they also have a high probability of getting you some extra ticks out of the trade. So we've already kind of covered this. So the requirements for the Lorex. I know Ron talked about it, but we're looking for on a reversal bar. We're looking for a TX from the 30, right? And then we're looking the base Lorex. We're looking for at least three of these things. We're looking for a mini magnet, an absorption X, a cluster, a paw, or no P rejection. And so a Lorex can have 3 of those and still be a Lorex. Now Ron's setup requires more than that, but the base Lorex is going to require at least 3 of those, things for the indicator to fire.
So if I can answer a couple questions really quickly. I think both Bruce and Donley were asking the same thing. Can you get in on the retrace if I miss the entry? So the answer is yes and no, and here's where the yes is. The yes is if I place my entry, we'll talk about this particular trade, right here at 33,814, and I get skipped. Now, if it hasn't gone 10 ticks and hit profit yet and retraces, I'll leave the order in. But if it goes to target, I pull the order out. But if I don't have my order in and I missed it, I will not place the order to try to catch up with the trade. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's so tempting when you see a trade and say you get skipped or you miss it to try and jump in there. But if it does retrace, which we know Lorexes have a tendency to do, especially when they have a cluster, if you can still get in prior to that third bar closing, if you can get in on the retrace, that is something that they cover in the Wealth Summit. And I was actually just going to talk about this, and I didn't see that question. But yeah, if it retraces to your entry point, then you can get in. But if that third bar closes, the trade is gone. Just moving on to the next trade. But yeah,
But
so you can get in.
yeah,
But
yeah, I personally do not, because like I've said in the Elite Room many times, I've taken the acronym FOMO completely out of my vocabulary. So the fear of missing out of a trade, that would be the only reason to get into that. It's because I'm just afraid I'm going to miss this thing and it's going to run and it's going to go. No, I will not get in it. I missed it. It's my fault. I wasn't paying attention. Then I don't deserve to be in that trade. That's kind of one of my rules.
Yep, and that goes for me too. Like, I can't remember the last time that I got into a trade on a retrace, right? Like, if the indicator fires and I miss it, I just miss it and I go on to the next trade, because so much can happen. Like, stuff can happen really quick on the reversal, right? Because you're getting an inflow of orders that's reversing the trade, and I don't want to be trying to click and get the order in and hoping for it. Like, I just let it, if I get in, great, and if I don't, well, there's always another trade.
Now I have to add to this, because people are going to say, well, why would you do that? Where did that come from? Well, there's a reason. And the reason is that I actually did this one time. And the one time that I did it, the trade lost. And I said, I'm never doing that again. And I'm really glad that that trade lost, because if it would have won, it would have basically put me on the path of something that could potentially be disastrous. And we've talked about this many times.
Yeah, I mean, if you can do it and be controlled enough because there's there's very specific rules on the re-entry, right? And that has to be executed in a very short time frame. Because I know for me, way back when, you want to chase the trade, right? Like, oh, that trade just happened, it's gonna go, and well, let's get in when this when this bar closes, and then what happens? You get in when that bar closes and immediately turns around, and you kick yourself. So
yeah.
Like, you can do the retrace, but I don't ever do a retrace entry. But it is something that you can do, and it's taught in the Wealth Summit to do it. But I personally don't.
I do this for everything, whether it's this, whether it's simplicity, whatever it is. If it's going, if the train has left the station, I'll wait for the next one. There's nothing worse than chasing a train and having the sucker turn right around and run you over.
Yeah, how many simplicity trades have we looked at and we don't like it's a confirmed simplicity entry based on our rules, but like say it's a big bar, it's a simplicity long and it goes way up and we're like and it blows past and it shoots past our entry point where would have ideally liked to get in. It's like, dang it. Oh well, next trade, right? So we don't want to get in the we don't want to get in a trade at a bad entry, and so we just watch it go by. And
Yeah,
sometimes I cry a little bit because,
yeah. Well, at least
but
it's getting to the crying a little bit because it used to be crying a lot, and it's
I
just
know.
gotten to the little bit over time,
Yeah,
right?
it's just a little bit now. I've been really working on that, not crying at
Yeah,
the
you're working
computer
on
as
to
much.
minimize the crying thing. That's like now it's shedding like 3 tears as opposed to like
Yeah.
a complete shower. Clip really quickly. No, the next step would be thrive. So once you finish with boot camp, or even before you finish it, actually I would recommend finishing it at least once or twice, and then going to thrive, and then after that, the wealth summit.
So Mike Hansen asks, so don't you arm the TA? So the Lorex is not integrated at this time with the TA. And so the best way to do it, the best way to trade the Lorex, in my opinion, and this is what I do, is you use the chart trader. And when you see the Lorex setting up based on your conditions, based on a level that say it's bouncing off a level that you like and it's setting up and you'll see the indicator, sometimes it'll it comes up, right? Sometimes it'll go away, but it comes back. But if you see it and it sets up, hit the buy on close. And then when the trade, when that bar closes, then you're going to be, it's going to execute the trade at the correct entry price. So that's how I trade the Lorex. Is
And I
I
do the
see it.
exact same thing.
Yep, and just use the chart trader.
Use the Apex chart trader.
Yeah, the TA is nice, but it's not. The Lorex is not integrated
Yep.
into
We
it.
both Ben and I both have the TA, and we do not use them. We don't use it. It's a nice tool to have, um, but it's dangerous. And what I mean by that is that it can get you to become dependent on it. And I always try to encourage people to understand the setup and know it very well and manually get into the trade and not rely on something else. Because if you can't see it, you shouldn't be in it.
Yeah, that takes me. I was having a conversation with a person the other day, and they were,
One, sorry,
and
Richard, one. Offset of one. Sorry, Ben, go ahead.
oh, I lost my train of thought. Oh, I was talking to someone the other day, and they were talking about they were going through some struggles like we all do, right? And this is piggybacking off what Ron just said. And on the trades that they were taking, they were all over the place. And I said, well, I want you to just trade YM and RTY. I said, and I only want you to take the trades that Lori and Ron call. And I said, and on top of that, that's the only trades I want you to take. Because this person was really struggling. I said, that's the only trades I want you to take. For 1 week. Just take the trades. And I said, I want you to set up the charts just like Ron and I went over in that video. So you can see all the components of the trade. And so they're only going to take the trades that are called, right? And then next week, when I talk to him, I've been talking to this person, I talked to him today again. Next week, it's going to say, I'm going to tell him, unless you can identify all the components of the trade, don't take the trade. The ER is a great resource. It is a fantastic place to be. But unless you can identify the trade itself, then people become, reliant on it. Just like how Ron was talking about, you can become reliant on the TA. You don't want to become reliant on Lori and Ron. Everything that they're saying should be supplemental to your read and what you're seeing. Because I've been there where it's like, I'm not going to take a trade unless Lori calls it. But now when she calls a trade, I can look at it and I see it. I'm like, okay, I like that trade. Bam, I'm going to take it. Or I don't like it for whatever reason, and I'm usually wrong because if Lori calls a trade, it's always usually a fantastic trade, right? But when she calls a trade, I look at it, and I go, oh, I like all the components. Okay, this is a great trade. Bam, take it. But if something's called in the room, so say when Daryl was in the room and he is a simplicity guy, right? He does amazing at simplicity. He's just a fantastic trader, and he takes simplicities. But if I miss the setup bar or he's calling us simplicity, and there was a time where I didn't understand simplicity, but I was taking simplicity, when Daryl was talking about simplicity. And sometimes they were great, and then sometimes, they didn't win because no trade, setup wins all the time. But then I got to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm going to understand simplicity, and I'm going to understand it to where, like, in nauseam. And so I watched like hours and hours of simplicity. And so then when Daryl was calling them in the room, I'm like, okay, this makes sense. I got it. I understand. I see it. Okay, now I can take this. Now I can take this simplicity because I understand the trade, not because Daryl called it, but because I understand it. I see it. I like it. I agree with it. And that's really been my approach on the ER, since for a long time, right? Unless I can see something and understand it completely, I don't take the trade. But starting out, it was a great resource, and it still is, but it was a great resource at understanding all the components that these seasoned and very experienced traders are looking for. So it helped guide me into seeing what I need to see. But also, if you don't put in the work, you can become reliant on it, and then you're not seeing it, and it hurts your trading in the long term. Because what if Lori goes on vacation? Well, you don't take any trades that week. What if Ron takes a vacation? We don't take any trades that week. So that would be my advice.
Saw a couple of chats in here. I forgot what it was that I was going to answer. I guess. So yeah, so what I was going to add to that, Ben, is you mentioned that you wouldn't take a trade unless Lori calls it at that point in time. And I would say the same thing with the addition to that is I'm not going to take a trade unless Lori calls it until I get it. And then once I get it, then I'm going to actually try to call it to myself before she does, and then see if I was correct. Which kind of transitioned to and what I do now with the intrabar scalp, which is a whole nother. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but it's the same kind of a thing. Because one of the things I've always talked about in the elite room is, on the one hand, if we want to think about it, yeah, it's great to have people following you and copying your trades and waiting for you to give them some direction or what have you. But at the end of the day, I want each trader to be able to do this on their own. So we've talked about this analogy many, many times. I can give you a sandwich and I'll satisfy your hunger for that particular moment in that meal. But if I teach you how to make that sandwich, then you'll be able to actually feed yourself for the rest of your life. So it's like I can call out the trade and I satisfied that particular need for that moment where you got that trade executed. But if I could teach you what makes up that trade and then teach you how to recognize it, and then you can recognize it on your own, then you'll be able to trade for the rest of your trading career. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, one of the coolest things that, like when I talk with people and quote unquote, mentor them, or I work with people, and it helps them as much as it helps me. But one of the awesome things is seeing people transition from struggling to taking information and helpful tips, or what they can do different, and seeing that transition from struggling rock bottom. Because a lot of people, well, I get a lot of random messages from people that I don't know, say in the mentor group or whatever, and they've really hit rock bottom, right? So they're really reaching out, looking for some help, and I always gladly help, right? I, I give my free time willingly to help anyone. But seeing people go through this transition where they've hit rock bottom or are really struggling, and then the people who can take information and are willing to make small changes, usually some bigger changes, and then some small changes going through that, in terms of psychology, in terms of trade setups, and in terms of mentality. Uh, a couple months ago, there was a trader. They reached out to me. We worked on a number of things, and now I think they have 4 or 5 funded accounts, and they're doing fantastic, right? And so that's awesome. And this person sees what Lori and Ron do in the ER, right? And and they're able to recognize the trades and take them themselves without relying on Ron and Lori. And they've been able to just, turn their results completely around, from blowing accounts to not blowing accounts, and then just kind of treading water, to passing the evals, and now funded, and now on path, to make withdrawals. So it's a pretty cool process to watch, because we've all been there, right? Like, everyone goes through, we all have ups and downs, but we try and minimize the downside. So I think that covers the Lorex. I'm going through all my notes. So the one caveat I would say with the Lorex is now, Ron, this is a question for you. Pop quiz.
Okay.
Is there a time, say all your conditions are met on a Lorex trade?
Okay.
Is there any condition for you that says to not take that trade?
Are you trying to stonewall me here?
The pop quiz.
Yeah,
No pressure.
The answer is yes. There is a time that no matter how great the setup looks, I will not take it. Oh, you're waiting for the answer as to why?
I'm waiting patiently.
So I actually watch Simplicity on NQ,
Exactly. Yep.
and if it's going in the opposite direction with some volume, no trade.
Yeah. Exactly. So that would be the only caveat I would say is with Lorex, is watch the simplicity chart. Especially if you're trading YM and R2Y, which we talk about all the time, right? If simplicity is in a strong long, right? And say that initial run up of a simplicity, right? You usually see it, you'll get some big bars and it's going up. And say you're on YM and RTY, and then looking at the simplicity, NQ's got room to fly, right? Like if there's no walls or obstructions on NQ, it's in a simplicity long. Chances or probability says that it will continue to the next obstruction. So if you're on YM and RTY and you get a Lorex short, maybe give you some pause. Now, if it's coming up to like a major level on YM and RTY, and that gives you some more confirmations to take it, then that's another discussion. But typically, if NQ is pushing one way, don't really want to go against that trend. So that would be the only caveat on to not when to not take it, or if you're taking a short into like a major level or settlement or a big order print stack. Those are the two conditions where I look at, and the trade gives me pause.
So Mark had made a comment that wasn't there a time that I decided not to take trades the day when I said I was driving to the office? So that's true, Mark, but that's different. That's something that's a psychological thing with me where I wasn't ready to trade that day, so I wouldn't even be looking for a setup. I just know that I'm not going to be trading that day. That's different than when a setup is staring me right in the face and it's got everything that I'm looking for, and I'm glancing over at the simplicity chart and it's going exactly, completely the opposite direction that I want to go. So that's a little different. The first option, is basically the umbrella for the entire day. The second option is the rule for the trade, or the exception as to why I would not take that Lorex setup, when it shows up, because simplicity is doing what it's doing in the opposite direction. Do you see the difference between the two? Because psychologically, if I wasn't ready to trade, I'm not even looking for signals, because I don't want to put myself in a position going, oh, well, maybe I should take this trade, and because of fear of missing out, there was that FOMO acronym again, and that just, no, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I've had days like that where I wake up and for whatever reason, and sometimes I can't put a finger on it, where I'm just like, I don't think I'm gonna trade today. I just don't feel it. And it's tough because I still sit here, I still load up my charts, and I watch the charts. But I'm also glad that once I've made the decision to not trade, that like I just don't trade. So Mark, so he asked a question. I thought the simplicity being in harmony with the great setup was a required criteria. Not with the Lorex. So we'll have the filter with simplicity is to not go against strong trends. Now, Mark, you might be talking about, there was mention in the ER with something Ron was looking at with the inner bar scalp, but that's completely different. So Ron was looking at simplicity with the inner bar scalp, and that's something Ron's still looking at.
So, just to kind of clear something up in the questions that are going back in chat, the only thing you would need an extra data feed for would be if you're planning on running and looking at simplicity. So that's the only thing.
And I know that if you don't want to buy, if you're not going to trade simplicity, but you just want to look at simplicity, then you can just use the elite room
chart.
chat,
Yep, just use
the room charts. I used those for a long time. So, but yeah, I think that covers. There's a lot more we could go into on the Lorex, but we also don't want to be here for forever, right?
Yeah, we've already been here for how long? An hour 15?
Oh my gosh, time is flowing by.
Time's
But
flying,
that,
man.
yeah, so that covers like the basic the basics of the Lorex. We covered, why, Ron and I trade the Lorex almost exclusively, except for, LREs in simplicity. So we cover the Lorex, we cover the conditions for the Lorex, why we think they're a great setup, the back testing that we've done, and not only have we done the back testing, we also have the live trade data that supports our back testing. Because one thing with back testing is sometimes you can get really good results in back testing, and then you go trade it live, and it just tanks. And it's terrible. So we have back test data and live test data. And Lori has that stuff too because she's been she's been trading the Lorex for like I don't even know how long, a long time. But yeah, so I think that covers the basics of the Lorex, why we take it, the trailing, the targets. I don't know if I can think of anything else to talk
No,
about in
I think
regards to the Lorex.
that's it. Unless people have questions, we'll wait a couple minutes. And if you haven't already done so, if you can please hit the like button, that would be greatly appreciated. And if you're not an Apex member and you're in here or going to be watching it and you want to know how to become one, the link is in the description. You can go and sign up, and you get 1 month for free. And you get access to the elite room, to the trade room where we're in every single morning, every single day, from 9:30 to noon Eastern time, and then where I'm actually doing a power hour session between 3 and 4 Eastern every single day. And you'll get access to all the indicators, all the tools, all the training, everything for free for 30 days. And also, if you sign up for any evaluation accounts, for whatever current discount is running, it will be applied immediately if you use the code LARGE. That's something that I actually have set up as a referral code. And yeah, I do get a little piece of that, just full disclosure. I don't get paid by Apex for anything else, neither does Ben. So even when I'm in the ER, everything, it's just I do this all on my own free will. So, but if you guys do sign up and use the code LARGE when you do for any eval accounts, that would help me a lot, and I'd really appreciate that. What else we need to cover? Anything else, Ben?
I don't think so. I know that talking about power hour, but no power hour today, right? Because
No,
of
no.
FOMC.
Yeah, no, there's no power hour today.
They should have those like once a year. They're
What,
so
power
annoying.
hours?
No, no,
Oh,
no.
FOMC?
FOMC, man. Every day I'm like, every time there's an FOMC, I'm like, oh, okay, annoying.
Yeah. So, yeah, because we've got FOMC today. So, thanks, guys. Again, thanks for joining us. Sorry about the little technical glitch we had early on. And appreciate everyone's time for joining us today and every time that you guys come and join us. And for all of you who are going to be watching the recording, thank you very much for taking the time and watching the recording. We appreciate that very much. And any comments, suggestions that you have, please put them in the comments. If you have any suggestions or requests for things that you'd like to see covered in upcoming roundtables, that would be great too. And that's it. So with that, I'm going to be signing off. And thank you again, everyone. Ben, thank you again for the time. I appreciate that very much.
Thank you, Ron. Of
And we will see you guys all in the elite rooms in the morning or in the power hour in the afternoon. Thanks. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you.